Hey, Marcus House with you here. Today we are going back to the stock Kerbal Space Program. This is the latest version of 1.4.5 with the Making History expansion installed. And today we have made a vessel which is capable of being completely reused. Not one part will be lost. The only thing we'll be using is the fuel, so we obviously would need to refuel each time. There are two parts to this mission. This very first vessel is going to get our main payload up into an orbit of exactly 100 kilometers, or very, very close to it. And then the idea is to land and then be able to reuse this booster. So we're launching this now, and the next vessel we're going to launch in this same video is basically a single return vessel and refueler. So the idea is that we can launch this vessel that we're launching here right now once, and once only, reuse that top payload multiple times and refuel it each time around. So you'll see all this play out in this video. Now, the central core of this vessel is using the newer S4 tanks, while the outside 4 cores are using the S3 tanks. And what we're going to be doing is switching to the vector engines only as we get up further in the atmosphere. The vector engines here, and there they go, they are just a little bit more efficient in a vacuum than the KE1 engines, the new huge engines that are obviously the analog of the Saturn's F1 engines. So the Vector's just a little bit more efficient. They have an ISP in a vacuum of 315, whereas the Mastodon engines, they've got an ISP of around 290. So it certainly pays to only use the Vectors when we need to, and we don't need the huge thrust to weight ratio up here anyway. Now, for those of you that are a bit of a beginner to the game, you'll notice that a lot of us that are playing here generally will circularize just as we're hitting our apoapsis time. So you'll see me time warping up here to the apoapsis, and we just want to circularize just as our time to apoapsis counts down to almost zero. This will give us a very nice circularized orbit. And you'll see I'm aiming here for around 100 kilometers, and there we go, 100 by 101 kilometers, so almost perfect there. Just folding out all of our solar panels to make sure we do not lose our electric charge. Then we can just undock our main moon lander vessel. This vessel here is going to be completely reusable, and the idea, as I said, is to land this on the moon, return back to a low Kerbal orbit, and basically be refueled to run a new mission. However, to make sure that we don't lose any parts at all in this mission, we need to, of course, land our huge booster here. This is definitely the bigger of our two boosters. We're just doing a very slight retrograde burn. You can see I almost hit the actual payload there. That was a little scary. So what we need to do here is fold out our air brakes, and we're going to guide this in to land hopefully quite close to the Kerbal Space Center. Now, what you may have noticed when we were looking at the map view is that I had a red cross that was predicting my landing location. That is a mod called the Trajectories mod. Very, very handy if you want to be able to plan a fairly accurate landing. What you'll also notice is I have a lot of visual enhancements to the game here. So I have got a mod list in the description, but one thing is that all of the parts are stock parts. There is nothing here modding the parts at all. Just coming into land, deploying both sets of chutes. The drogue chutes help slow us down a little, give us a little bit more control, and of course the main parachutes just slow our descent enough for me to just nicely and accurately touch down with all of our engines firing, and there we go. Touchdown there with, well, over 4,000 units of fuel left, so that was reasonably comfortable. We could even get into a slightly higher orbit and save a little fuel for our moon lander if we needed to. Speaking of our moon lander, we are just preparing now to do our trans-lunar injection burn. A very small burn really in the stock game. Obviously I've been playing a lot of Realism Overhaul lately if you've seen previous videos in my channel. The video appearing in the top right now is a full SpaceX simulation of the Iridium mission from the other week. So that was quite an interesting one, and it actually did turn out quite similar to the real mission as well. So check that out. This vessel is powered by 6 of the tiny little RV1 engines. They're new to the Making History expansion. Very cool little engines, and essentially we can get all the way to the moon, land on the moon. The thrust to weight for this vessel is more than enough to do that, and it means that they don't take up a real lot of space. We don't need any bulky landing legs or anything like that to come down over the top of a large engine, so I quite liked that. So we have our trajectory set up to the moon, coming right down quite close to the moon's surface. We'll obviously then be doing a retrograde burn to slow our velocity to the point where we can bring our periapsis right down near the surface of the moon. All we need to do then is find a good landing location, and I do think that our 3 little green Kerbals would certainly appreciate it if we landed somewhere interesting today. So for those of you that don't like spoilers, don't watch this next 20 seconds because I'm showing you exactly how to get to the moon arch. Just need to do a very slight inclination change here just to bring our trajectory right down to around this spot here, just above this huge crater. And now we just need to execute that burn. A small correction, only 70 meters per second. And this is going to hopefully bring us down quite close. So just getting ourselves lined up there, and slight burn. Only a few seconds, like I say, and there we go. We are now ready to land. Now, you'll see our vessel here has a huge amount of science equipment available. We also have our mobile processing lab right in the middle, so we do have some storage for some extra Kerbals. Firing up those engines, we will deploy those landing legs, and hopefully you can see the arch coming up here in front of us. Hopefully we'll be able to get quite close. Now, the idea when trying to save fuel when landing is to try to minimize the amount of time that you spend burning fuel to fight gravity. So the idea is to try to touch down in what they generally call a suicide burn. I wanted to point out that I'm not doing it particularly effectively here. There was a few times when I needed to point upwards just a little because I was not going to come in quite close enough to the arch. So fighting gravity just a little more than I needed to here, and touching down there now. So probably could have shaved a few meters per second off that landing, but we do have quite a good fuel margin in this vessel. The idea is for it to be able to get all the way back to a Kerbal orbit successfully without entirely running out of fuel. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, our friend Burberry Kerman is back, graceful as he's ever been. He is our master pilot, our celebrity from this channel, and I haven't used Burberry Kerman for a very long time. So hi Burberry, it's great to see you back. Let's take a trip, mate, over to the moon arch and we'll see what's going on over there. Speeding up the footage, of course, because EVAing is quite boring if we're doing it in real time. But you can see there, I've actually got him hooking quite quickly. I overshot the moon arch a little, but it's a good chance to have a look over the top of the arch and see if there's anything interesting going on there. There's not, of course, because it's just an arch. So let's just touch down there, have a little bit of a look, and we'll check out that wonderful serenity here. And you can see there that we're just 1 kilometer away from our moon base, so we landed very closely there, considering we were trying to go for a bit of a suicide burn kind of effect there. So Burberry Kerman, you can come back now, hop back in our vessel. It is almost time to run all of our wonderful science experiments. Now, I am running this mission in sandbox mode, but you can essentially pick up this entire craft. The link for the craft is in the description, along with a collection of all my other crafts and vessels. And there's also a bunch of Kerbal operating system scripts and things in there for those of you that are interested in some of the SpaceX landings that have been done recently on my channel. So just picking up all of those wonderful science experiments. I don't actually need to collect them for any reason, but they are there for you to play with. And we'll touch our scientists down here so that we can do the ceremonial planting of the flag and possibly take a thumbnail shot. Let's see how this comes out. We have the flag there, give the flag a name, so we are at the arch, and there we go. A beautiful shot there. Is that a thumbnail shot? I don't know. I'm yet to make the thumbnail. So let's see. Let's go back to our vessel, and we're going to hop back in the. We'll hop in the science bay to run some experiments, shall we? So we'll board there. Our 2 female Kerbonauts on board, Catherine and Mel, both had a bit of a jaunt around the moon's surface. I did cut some of that out because the video was just starting to get a little bit long. So we're going to fold in our solar panels just so they don't snap off in the takeoff, and off we launch here. You can see there we have less than half the fuel in our tank, but as you can probably imagine, because we have less fuel weight, we also have a much larger thrust to weight ratio, so we can get all the way back to a low Kerbal orbit at exactly 100 kilometers, or again, as close as I can get to 100 kilometers. That means that we can then launch a refuel mission. We can send our 3 wonderful Kerbonauts, Burberry, Catherine and Mel, back home after their very brave mission. As it is, Burberry Kerman is being reprimanded for such carelessness coming out of the capsule. Some mandatory retraining of EVA technology is going to be required there, I think. So yes, Burberry, very best of luck there. Some readjusting of your attitude also might be in order. Anyway, we are now doing our circularization burn at our apoapsis of our moon there, just circularizing there at between 21 and 31 kilometers from the surface. We now, of course, need to set up a burn to eject from the moon's sphere of influence in a retrograde direction. So that means it's going to allow us to fall back in towards the lower orbit of Kerbal. Now, if you guys would like to try out this vessel with a Minmus mission, that is perfectly fine as well. I did take this to Minmus, and I was actually able to do 3 or 4 biome hops with this vessel and return it with around the same amount of fuel left. And that's essentially because the gravity on Minmus is so tiny. You can basically land there multiple times and still return to a low Kerbal orbit in the exact same way we're doing here. So just bringing that periapsis there around Kerbal right down to around 100 kilometers from the surface, as we said. There we go there. We'll deploy those solar panels so we don't lose our battery power, and we can now slowly coast home. For those of you that are interested in a number of the other mods I have installed, I'll just quickly go through a few of them here. We have camera tools that gives us the ability to do nice camera shots of flybys and things like that. We have environmental visual enhancements with the scatterer mods to give us the beautiful clouds and the beautiful water. That's fairly common to most YouTubers. I think we are all running that. We also run PlanetShine a lot of the time. I'm running that in this one. That gives us a little nicer reflections from the surfaces of the bodies we're orbiting around. I cannot live, of course, without the Kerbal Engineer mod. That gives us all the wonderful numbers, the Delta V stats, all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic. And the only other few mods that I use quite frequently here are Better Time Warp. That just lets us warp time just a little more flexibly than the stock game. And of course, we also have the minimum ambience, little lighting control, so that I can present things just a little more nicely for you on camera. Otherwise, everything could quite often be very, very dark. So we're just getting ready here to do a slight inclination adjustment. We want to bring our inclination right down to as close to 0 as possible. You can see from the panel there, the number, I should say, in the top right of the screen there. We're bringing that inclination right down. And this is essentially just so that we're going to be orbiting right over the top of the Kerbal Space Center. There we go. We have around 400 meters of Delta V remaining. So there's quite a margin there to play with. And this now is our reusable launcher that we can use to refuel our vessel up there and also return our 3 Kerbals back home. Of course, we need to make sure that we pick our launch window correctly, and we need to first set our little full moon reuse vessel here as our target, and we'll wait until our target is just above the ocean as it passes over that continent to the left-hand side there. You'll see we have a phase angle of around 332 degrees, 33 degrees. That seems to be about right to make a good rendezvous if your thrust to weight ratio is kind of similar to what I've got here, which is around 1.4 or so. So we're launching here now, again switching to those vector engines as soon as we get high out of the atmosphere, as soon as our thrust to weight stops mattering quite so much. And we'll just wait now until we get quite close to our target. You can see they're very, very close. The idea here is to burn quite hard to remove our relative velocity to the target. You see I've got our nav ball switched there into target mode, around 600 meters per second to wipe off there. And as our intersect markers there, the orange ones, get close, we'll just back off a little. You can see there I'm slightly pointing down on the nav ball just to make sure that we are not raising our apoapsis, because we're at around 103 kilometers now, which is about spot on here. See our target there passing over us. We are at around 2.5 kilometers there now. We'll just wait till it passes by and then wipe off that final 72 meters per second. And there we go, right down there. We can now switch to our vessel and just do a leisurely little puff towards the target there, 32 meters per second, which is much, 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 much faster than what we would do this in real life, of course. But this is Kerbal Space Program. We have no reason to be cautious. We always have that quick save, quick load option to fall back to. Not that we need it in this case, because this whole section of the mission went very smoothly actually, so we'll just reduce that tiny little bit of velocity right off there. There we go, we'll set the targets and we'll begin our docking maneuver. Now what you'll notice is I just need to get sort of slightly in the correct direction, and we'll switch to the other vessel and we'll set our alternate vessel to the target and make it slowly move towards that target at all times using the stability assist. That means that we always are going to be pointing in the right direction. We just need to make sure that our orientation is correct, so just moving ourselves ever so slightly just to make sure that we're lining up correctly. And you'll see that I've switched to the locked camera mode. This makes it much easier because we can just use our H and N keys along with I, J, K and L to just adjust our position as we approach the target, and no problem, docked there perfectly. Now we'll bring out the solar panels just to make sure that we are recharging all of our batteries, and we just need to remove one Kerbal, and that's going to be Burberry, because Burberry's going to do an inspection of the vehicle, and because we have removed one Kerbal, we can transfer Kerbals back and forth to make sure that all the Kerbals returning home are in the new capsule that we've just attached, and all our new Kerbals, Jebediah, Bill and Bob, are all in the reusable Moon vessel, so they can head off to a brand new mission while leaving the new Kerbals to return home safely to their families and to be reprimanded for stupidity. So we have Burberry doing his inspection of the vessel, make sure everything checks out, and we can then begin our refueling procedure. There is quite a lot of extra fuel in the vessel that we have brought up here, but now that our transfers of Kerbals are complete, we can now undock the new little capsule that's come up, and we can then turn our vessel around, dock in the reverse direction so that we can begin our refuel. Now, of course, in the stock Kerbal Space Program game, there's no reason to actually do this. I thought this would be cool just from a mission point of view, because it seems quite unrealistic to me to transfer fuel through the capsule into the fuel tanks. It just doesn't seem quite right that you should be able to do that. So the idea here is that we transfer fuel up from the bottom of the craft into the fuel tanks in this mechanism here. So we are just docking via the large docking ports. Same method as before, using locked camera mode to bring those together nicely. And we'll just then begin transferring fuel out of the top Kerbal S4 tank into all of our tanks on our reusable Moon or Minmus transfer vessel there. We can also transfer that little bit of monopropellant that we used as well, just in case. Now it's just time to get ready to do our departure, both for Jebediah's team and also Burberry's team, to come back to Kerman and hopefully land quite close to the Kerbal Space Center. We'll just now undock our little capsule and get ready to do a small retrograde burn just using monopropellant to actually set our destination on the planet. Again, we're going to be using that Trajectories mod to make sure that our landing is right on target on the Kerbal Space Center. So we want to get it right over the top, and we can move it back and forward again with those H and N keys. Very flexible, the monopropellant controls, and we'll of course time warp in so that we can see how this landing goes. Now, in the case of the capsule, there's no need for us to do any burns on the way in. This is essentially because we have a heat shield. There's no risk of anything overheating. The large boosters do have to slow down quite a bit, otherwise their engines will explode. So we can pretty much leave the Trajectories mod to give us a pretty good accurate estimate on where we're going to touch down. Screaming in here at over 2,000 meters per second. It looks like we're going to overshoot it, but the mass of this thing really does let you wipe off the velocity really quickly, and as luck comes to have it, we're going to be touching down pretty much right over the airfield by the looks of it. So just coming down, we'll extend those landing legs, make sure that our new Twitch engines are engaged. There's 8 of them on this vessel, and we're just using up any monopropellant just to get rid of extra weight. And there we go, firing. We need to try to do a suicide burn here because we need to touch down just right, otherwise we're going to run out of fuel. And there we go. That was actually the trickiest landing of the whole lot. It had to be exactly right. So we've recovered that vessel. We have Catherine, Mel and Burberry all home safely. Jebediah, Bob and Bill, of course, can depart on their new mission, which will probably be off to Minmus somewhere. Meanwhile, we, of course, can come and land that final booster. Now, remember, not one part has been lost in this entire mission. It's been a pretty good example of all sorts of procedures, docking procedures. It's a really fun mission to play out. So a slight burn there to bring that vessel right down over the Kerbal Space Center again. The fuel margin in this vessel not quite as high as the last larger booster, but more than enough to get you back home safely. Again, use the controls, use the air brakes to come and land, and you'll find that you'll be able to land quite accurately like me here with just a little practice. So, for those of you that aren't aware yet, I do now have a Discord channel. We have quite the community growing down here, and if you want to chat with me in a more personal way rather than just the typical YouTube comments, come and join the channel. What we're actually trying to do at the moment is actually get a little more engagement with you guys, because I love actually communicating with you all, and we're just toying around with the idea of maybe me doing some missions where I take your vessels and missions and play them out in front of everybody, and yeah, we get to actually talk about missions that you've made, which I think would be a really cool idea. just coming to touchdown with our final refuel vessel. Because of the low mass of this thing and the large number of parachutes, you can land that one very easily. The first booster is a little more difficult, so there's going to be 2 craft files in the description for you guys to play with. You can grab both of those there, and I hope you enjoyed that video because it was a lot of fun to put together. In the meantime, we can wave goodbye to Jebediah and Bill and Bob, and we will see those guys in a future mission. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Please do take a second and hit that like button, hit the bell, hit the subscribe, hit all the stupid things you've got to hit these days to actually be notified of my content. Your support is just awesome. In the tile in the bottom left today, we have our Iridium SpaceX simulation from the other week. In the top right is my latest video, and in the bottom right, a video that YouTube has selected from my channel just for you by some sad little robot. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video.